In the winter of 1821, in a small village near the Scottish Highlands, an event took place that shook the community's understanding of both human nature and the mind itself. A young boy appeared, speaking a language no scholar, traveler, or linguist had ever heard. This wasn't just an unfamiliar dialect. It followed strange rules and structures that seemed beyond anything known in human speech. The story comes from the private journals of Dr. Hamish Mloud, the village doctor, and is backed by the testimonies of 17 witnesses. It tells of a child who seemed to carry secrets from a place that should not exist. To understand its weight, we first need to look at Scotland at that time. The country was still dealing with the aftershocks of the Highland clearances, when thousands were forced from their lands to make room for sheep farming. Inverare, the village where the boy appeared, had about 300 people, mostly farmers and fishermen. Cut off from larger towns by dangerous trails, it was a place where religion mixed with old Celtic beliefs, and the arrival of a stranger always drew attention. The winter of 1821 was especially severe. Heavy snow blocked the main roads for weeks, leaving the village completely cut off. On February 14th, schoolteacher Margaret McTavish opened her classroom door and found a boy sitting on the steps. He was about 8 or 9 years old, dressed in clothing she didn't recognize, thin and silky, cut in a style unlike anything local. What struck her most were his eyes, which shone with an unusual brightness. Margaret tried speaking to him in English, then Gaelic, and even a little French. He answered, but in a language that sounded musical and flowing, like water, yet structured with clear meaning. She later wrote in her diary that it wasn't just that she couldn't understand him, it was as if the language itself felt unnatural, produced in ways the human voice shouldn't manage. Still, it was clearly intelligent and ordered. She brought him inside and noticed he began pointing at objects, naming them in his language as if trying to teach her. That's when she realized his words had a mathematical pattern. For one book, he said something like, Vylon. For 2 books, Vylon verith. For 3, Vylon verth Kyle. But instead of continuing this pattern, 4 books became Mundara, and 5 was still Mundara. Margaret understood she was seeing a counting system unlike the familiar base 10. This boy seemed to think in base 4. By afternoon, nearly half the village had gathered at the schoolhouse to see him. Among them was Dr. Hamish Mloud. At first, he dismissed the rumors, but when he examined the child, he found things that science could not explain. The boy's vocal cords had extra muscle fibers and cartilage, allowing him to produce sounds far beyond human capacity. His skull was slightly larger, with unusual bone formations near areas linked to language. His eyes, already striking, had pupils that reacted in ways unrelated to light. Most unsettling was his heart. It didn't beat with the normal 2-step rhythm but in a 4-beat sequence that followed a mathematical pattern Dr. Mloud couldn't decode. As word of the strange child spread beyond Inverare, scholars and curious outsiders began making their way to the isolated village. Among the visitors who came to study the boy was Professor Alistair Dunn, a linguist from the University of Glasgow who specialized in ancient languages. He spent 3 weeks in the village carefully recording the child's speech and searching for any link to known languages. His findings, published years later in a restricted academic paper, were both fascinating and unsettling. Dunn wrote that the boy's language showed a level of complexity beyond anything humans had ever created. It seemed built for a mind capable of understanding multiple layers of reality at the same time. Dunn noticed patterns suggesting the language could express ideas that ordinary human speech could not. The boy appeared able to describe time, space, and even emotions in ways that required advanced mathematical and physical knowledge unknown to science at that time. More troubling, Dunn discovered that the language itself was evolving. Words the boy used in the first week were changed and refined later, almost as if he was trying to make himself more understandable to people. It looked like he was attempting to build a bridge between his thoughts and human comprehension, but the effort seemed to be causing him great distress. As weeks passed, the villagers saw changes in the child's behavior. He grew restless, especially at night, when many reported hearing him speak urgently in his strange language. Margaret McTavish, who cared for him, described in her diary how he would spend hours pointing at constellations and speaking quickly, as if trying to communicate with something beyond the earth. The boy's drawings soon added to the mystery. Given paper and charcoal by Mary Sinclair, the village seamstress, he produced images that were unlike anything anyone had seen. They weren't simple sketches, but intricate diagrams filled with mathematical symbols, astronomical charts, and unknown signs. Though no one could read them, they showed a clear sense of logic and precision. Dr. Mloud kept some of these drawings in his journal, calling them glimpses into a mind that worked on principles humans could not grasp. One drawing in particular caught everyone's attention. It looked like a map, but not of any place on Earth. Geometric shapes were linked by lines, resembling a kind of network or communication system. The boy would point repeatedly at certain symbols while speaking with urgency. Dunn tried to interpret them but concluded they represented ideas with no equivalent in human thought. He believed the boy was trying to indicate a location, or perhaps a presence, that lay outside normal space and time. By mid-March, the child began showing signs of what villagers described as prophecy. On March 15th, he became frantic, pointing to the sky and speaking with increasing urgency. 2 days later, a violent snowstorm struck, lasting exactly 3 days and causing damage to homes. The villagers were stunned that the boy had predicted both its arrival and duration. Similar events followed through March and April. Each time, he grew agitated and pointed either to the sky or specific directions, and within days, storms, landslides, or even unexpected visitors would arrive. Dr. Mloud documented each event carefully and became convinced the boy possessed knowledge far beyond human limits. The situation escalated at the end of April when representatives of the British Crown arrived in Inverare. Colonel James Worthington, a military intelligence officer, led the group, accompanied by Dr. Erasmus, a government physician who specialized in unusual mental cases, and Professor Cornelius Ashworth, an expert on ancient languages and lost civilizations. Their arrival marked the end of the village's open contact with the boy and the beginning of a cover-up that would last for more than 200 years. Colonel Worthington's first order was to limit all access to the child. Villagers were forbidden to speak to him without official permission, and the colonel began his own interrogations. The transcripts of these sessions, found in secret government archives in 1987, revealed the depth of the official's concerns. In a report dated April 28, 1821, Dr. Erasmus wrote, "The subject shows cognitive abilities that go far beyond anything we currently understand about the human mind." Dr. Erasmus concluded in his report that the boy's language seemed to carry knowledge beyond anything science of the time could explain. Professor Ashworth was even more blunt. He wrote that the child's abilities were not just unusual, they were impossible. The boy was communicating ideas and information no human mind should be able to hold, something far beyond ordinary human development. Colonel Worthington's findings were perhaps the most alarming. He noted that the boy's drawings included detailed layouts of military sites and geographic features that were considered classified secrets. There was no way the child could have known such things by normal means. For 2 weeks, government officials carried out intense examinations of the boy. During this time, villagers were barred from entering the schoolhouse where the sessions were held. Even so, many reported hearing strange noises at night, voices that sounded like the boy's but warped, as if coming through water or echoing from a great distance. Margaret McTavish recorded in her diary that she feared for him. She noticed his once bright eyes losing their glow and wrote that it seemed as though they were draining the light from his soul. On May 12, 1821, the boy vanished. Government documents later claimed he had been moved to medical facilities for continued study, but villagers told another story. Thomas McBride, the blacksmith, reported seeing a carriage leave before dawn. Inside, he saw the boy, but also strange shadow-like figures moving unnaturally around him. The boy spoke in his language, yet his voice seemed to fill the air itself, coming from everywhere at once. Others said the carriage moved without sound, and some swore that glowing lights followed it into the mountains. That was the last time anyone in Inverare saw the boy. But his disappearance did not end the mystery. In fact, it marked the beginning of something even more troubling. In the decades that followed, unusual cases began appearing in medical and military records across the British Empire, cases that echoed the events in Inverrare. The first incident was reported in August 1821, just 3 months after the boy was taken. Dr. William Hartwell, chief physician at the Royal Hospital of Edinburgh, wrote to the War Ministry about a patient who had suffered a seizure during a university experiment. While delirious, the man began speaking in a language no one recognized. Hartwell realized the speech matched the patterns described in the classified Inverrare reports. When the patient recovered, he remembered nothing and could not speak any foreign language. This same pattern would repeat many times over the next decade. Between 1821 and 1830, at least 40 similar cases were recorded in hospitals, universities, and military sites throughout Britain. People with no training in languages would suddenly speak the strange tongue during fevers, seizures, or experiments involving electricity and magnetism. Even more unsettling was that many seemed to be passing on real information. At Cambridge, professors reported patients solving advanced mathematical problems in the unknown language. Military engineers described soldiers speaking in trances, giving detailed designs for machines that would not be invented for decades. By 1825, the matter reached the highest levels of the Crown. During a royal visit to the Greenwich Observatory, the Prince Regent, later King George IV, witnessed an incident firsthand. While observing a planetary alignment, a young assistant named Peter Thornberry suddenly fell into a trance and began speaking the mysterious language. But unlike previous cases, this time he seemed to be answering someone, as if carrying on a conversation with an unseen presence. He pointed to constellations and uttered complex sound sequences that followed exact mathematical patterns. The prince, at first curious, quickly became unsettled as he realized what was happening. Dr. Maskelyne, in his confidential report, wrote that it was as if the boy were receiving astronomical instructions from a source no one else could perceive. Even more astonishing, the details he gave proved accurate when later checked against precise calculations. This incident led to the creation of a secret royal commission to study what was officially referred to as the impossible language. Formed in 1826, the Royal Commission for Linguistic Anomalies was chaired by Colonel Worthington, the same officer who had investigated the original Inverrare case. Over the next 15 years, the commission gathered records of hundreds of cases and developed increasingly troubling theories. Declassified files, released in part only in 1995, reveal that the commission began focusing on one disturbing idea, that the boy's language was somehow contagious. Dr. Erasmus, who had examined the child years earlier, became the commission's lead theorist. He proposed what he called the theory of linguistic transmission. According to his reports, the language itself seemed to act like a seed, capable of planting itself in the human mind under the right conditions. The commission found patterns supporting this theory. Most cases arose when people were in altered states, fever, seizures, scientific experiments, or mystical trances. Many also reported vivid dreams beforehand, almost always featuring a child teaching them words in a strange language. In one 1829 account, Margaret Sinclair, wife of an Oxford professor, described dreaming of a boy who taught her words she had never heard, yet in the dream she understood perfectly. When she awoke speaking the impossible language, she recognized the very words from her dreams. In 1831, the commission uncovered something that changed everything. They learned the boy from Inverrare was still alive. The claim came from James Morrison, a former soldier who testified that he had worked at a secret military facility in northern England. Morrison said the government held anomalous subjects there, and one of them was the boy. He described a cell lined with lead and iron, supposedly to block whatever influence the child produced. Yet Morrison swore he could hear the boy's voice through the walls, and whenever he spoke, strange events followed. According to his testimony, equipment malfunctioned, guards slipped into trances and spoke in unknown tongues, and most disturbing of all, mysterious writing appeared on the walls. Complex symbols carved themselves overnight, no matter how many times they were scrubbed away. Investigators later confirmed the facility existed and even found walls still marked with symbols identical to those in the boy's early records. But the site was abandoned with no sign of the child or other subjects. Morrison said the facility had been evacuated suddenly in 1830 after something happened. something so alarming that the scientists decided to release him rather than continue their work. From then on, reports of the boy became scattered and contradictory, but no less strange. Between 1831 and 1850, sightings continued across Britain and Ireland. The most baffling detail was that the boy never seemed to age. In 1835, a Dublin merchant claimed to see him in a tavern, speaking with sailors in a voice so resonant that glasses shook on the tables. In 1841, a Bristol physician treated a wounded child who spoke the impossible language, only for him to vanish overnight, leaving carved symbols on the walls of his hospital room. The most detailed case came in 1847, during the Irish famine. Father Michael O'Sullivan, working with starving refugees in Liverpool, wrote to his bishop about a boy who stood out among the suffering crowd. His clothes were spotless, he looked healthy, and he spoke in the strange language O'Sullivan recognized from earlier reports. Being a scholar of ancient languages himself, the priest managed to record several hours of conversation. The boy, he wrote, seemed intent on teaching him, and over time O'Sullivan began to grasp fragments of what he was saying. Father O'Sullivan reported that the child spoke of places that existed on no map, of people who lived between moments, and of a great gathering yet to come. Even more unsettling, the boy revealed details about O'Sullivan's own life, private memories, hidden fears, and thoughts he had never told anyone. It was as if he could read not just my mind, but the entire history of my soul, the priest wrote. When the boy left, O'Sullivan felt marked, chosen for a purpose he could not understand. 3 years later, Father O'Sullivan was found dead under mysterious circumstances. His body showed no signs of illness or injury, but his face was frozen in terror. The walls of his cell were covered in hundreds of symbols from the boy's script, written in a hand that was not his own. In 1851, exactly 30 years after the child's first appearance in Inverare, the sightings suddenly stopped. For decades, there were no further reports. But the mystery had not ended, it had shifted. By the 1860s, a new pattern emerged. Instead of sightings, prominent scientists began reporting strange dreams and influences. Charles Darwin privately wrote to his cousin that, during his final work on the origin of species, he dreamed in a language of numbers and patterns that gave him insights into evolution. Gregor Mendel admitted in letters that his key discoveries on heredity came from dreams where a child taught him the grammar of life in a strange symbolic tongue. Again and again, leading thinkers described the same phenomenon, visions of an impossible language that gave them breakthroughs in science. The Royal Commission for Linguistic Anomalies was dissolved in 1876, but not because the case was solved. Its final report, signed by Colonel Worthington shortly before his death, warned that the boy of Inverare was not fully human. His language was more than communication. It was a technology capable of shaping human thought and accelerating intelligence. The report concluded that every person touched by the language became a new carrier, spreading patterns of thought that could be altering humanity's future. The files were ordered classified indefinitely. In the 20th century, signs of the boy's influence resurfaced. Dr. Elena Kenos, a historian at Cambridge, studied the declassified files for 20 years. In 1987, she revealed striking correlations. The locations of boy sightings consistently matched the sites of major scientific discoveries within a generation. She also noted that many of the greatest minds of the 19th and 20th centuries privately described experiences with an impossible language. Nikola Tesla wrote of electric whispers, in a language of numbers that guided his inventions. Albert Einstein said the equations of relativity came to him in a cosmic language beyond words. Even Watson and Crick hinted in letters that their discovery of DNA structure was inspired by insights they could not explain. Kenos concluded that the boy's language may have been quietly advancing human knowledge for over a century. The real question, she argued, was not whether he still influences us, but how deeply our progress has already been guided by something non-human. Today, the case of the Inverare boy remains one of Britain's strangest unsolved mysteries. Some believe he was a time traveler, bringing knowledge of the future. Others suggest he was an extraterrestrial messenger, using mathematics as a universal tongue. A few propose he was a glimpse of humanity's own future consciousness. What is certain is this: In 1821, a child appeared in a remote Scottish village speaking a language no one could understand. His presence began a chain of events that may still be shaping our civilization. If researchers are right, his influence has never ended. It whispers in the dreams of scientists and inventors, quietly steering our path toward a future that may have been set in motion over 200 years ago. Perhaps this was always the plan. If this story of hidden history and strange influence intrigued you, subscribe to our channel for more untold accounts from humanity's forgotten past. Turn on notifications, because the next mystery could change everything we think we know. Until then, remember, some discoveries don't just explain history, they rewrite it. The story of the boy with the forbidden language leaves us with more questions than answers. From the quiet Highland village where he first appeared, to the government halls where officials tried to lock away his voice, his presence has always unsettled those who came near him. His words carried patterns no one had ever seen before, a language that seemed to reach beyond human thought, touching on ideas and truths far ahead of its time. Teachers, doctors, priests, and scientists all tried to make sense of what he said, yet most left with only fragments, numbers, symbols, and visions that haunted them long after. Reports of his strange tongue resurfaced again and again, spreading through dreams, trances, and sudden outbursts in people who had never even met him. Some believed it was a gift, a spark of knowledge meant to guide human progress. Others feared it was dangerous, something that could not be contained or understood, and that trying to unlock it might bring consequences beyond our control. What makes this story so haunting is not only the boy's mystery but the way his language seemed to weave itself into history. From whispered dreams that inspired breakthroughs in science, to chilling accounts of people speaking in voices not their own, the traces of his presence remain scattered across centuries. If true, this would mean his influence has quietly shaped the world we live in today. We are left to wonder, was he a visitor from another time, a messenger from beyond our world, or perhaps a glimpse of what humanity itself could one day become? Each theory carries its own weight, yet none can fully explain the strange power of his words. In the end, the forbidden language is not just about one boy, it is about us. It challenges our understanding of knowledge, of reality, and of how fragile the boundary is between the known and the unknown. Whether a myth or a hidden truth, the boy's story continues to echo through time, a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be carried, generation after generation. And so, his voice lingers, not on the page, not in a classroom, but in the space between questions we cannot answer and truths we are not yet ready to face. Perhaps that is why the tale refuses to fade. Each retelling feels less like folklore and more like a quiet signal waiting for those willing to listen. The boy's language may never be decoded in full, but its presence reminds us that human understanding is still young, still reaching. It forces us to look at history not only as a record of what happened, but as a map of what we do not yet comprehend. And maybe, hidden within that mystery, lies the key to our future. His story is unfinished, and maybe it always will be.